Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about the parts of a plant, so let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. Now, when we're talking about parts of a plant, let's remind ourselves about the three major areas that we're going to be discussing. You've got that root system. Again, root systems kind of have their own, they'll have their own video that we'll discuss. And then we're going to be talking about the shoot system. That's the stem and the leaves and things like that. And of course, then the reproductive parts. The stem and the reproductive parts we'll talk about in this video, and then when it comes to leaves, they've got their own, and as I mentioned, roots have their own video. Now, when we're talking about parts of a plant, everything that I'm say as far as definition is in that little section of text to the far right of the diagram below me. But you've got your node section. Nodes are where the stems are attached. The leaf stems, the petioles, are attached to the stem. I started to use the word stem twice. That threw me off. And in the section in between those are the internodes section. So nodes is where there's a growth region that the petioles, the leaf stems grow, and the nodes, internodes, are the space in between. As I mentioned, the stem of a leaf, that's the petiole, and of course you got the leaf itself. And yeah, I'm sorry, I had the flip side. The screen just fit better over here as opposed to where it typically is. But when we think about plant cell types, there's three main cell types. The parenchyma, which we mentioned a lot in the last video. Those are the videos that function the photosynthetic processes. But they also store food. I mean, if you're going to make sugars, you got to be able to store them as well. These are also ones that secrete things, resource-based stuff that the plant may need. The parenchyma cells, they're support type cells. They're pretty strong, durable. You can think of them as, just, I guess support's the best way of saying that. Support cells. Now the sclerenchyma cells, these are the cell types that if a plant doesn't have one, it's this one, because these are what makes the woody portion of like a tree. So if you're just a blade of grass, you may not have sclerenchyma cells very much. And sclerenchyma cells, once you see them, obviously like the bark of a tree, those cells are not alive any longer. They're dead at maturity. So the two things that take away from sclerenchyma cells is that they could be dead at maturity, and they're not found on every plant. The next aspect to talk about plants when we're discussing parts is the growth patterns, and there are two main growth patterns: the primary and the secondary. Primary growth is designed for length. Okay, designed for length. So like a blade of grass, or a dandelion that seems to grow overnight, gets tall. That's primary growth. Upwards, okay, and downwards in the case of roots. Secondary growth is width, okay, or girth, widening of the plant. So like a tree, its primary growth what gives it its height, and its secondary growth is what gives it its width or girth. And as it says on the screen, there's a plant pigment that is front and center in helping to promote these processes, and that's the pridochrome pigment that does this. But again, the thing to remember is, especially when it comes to multiple choice test questions, primary growth is height or length when you encompass the roots, and the secondary is girth or width, thickness of a plant. All right, now when we're thinking parts of a plant, we're thinking reproductive. Okay, this is obviously is a sketch of a plant, and you can see from the very top, working our way down, the stigma. That's the female part. That's the part that where fertilization occurs once the pollen lands on there. Just like with humans or animals, be the same idea. The pollen or sperm, which is interesting to think about when people think about allergies and pollen. Really, it's just plant sperm. But and then you've got the ovaries down there, ovules down there. Once the fertilization has occurred, that's where the seed will develop and the fruit will develop. And in the male parts, you've got the anther, you've got the filament. That's where the pollen is produced to be released. And then of course, you've got the petals of a flower with the purpose of bringing in pollinators with the color, or it could be a scent that is produced within the flower to bring them in, whether it's sweet. And there's some plants that want flies. They use flies as pollinators, and so their smell isn't sweet. Their smell is stinking. In fact, there's one plant that goes as far as producing a scent of just smells very similar to rotting meat to bring the fly pollinators in. And then underneath the petals, you've got the sepals. The sepals will be what you see before a flower blooms, that green stuff, very, very tough, durable stuff that surrounds the flower, almost like a cocoon and a butterfly. The sepals will be the cocoon, and then, of course, the butterfly would be the the petals itself. So looking at individual parts. Okay, we mentioned the stamens. These are the male parts. Now in this picture, the anthers are the kind of the orangish, not quite triangle, but shaped things at the very top of the stamens or the filaments. So that arrow, that second arrow over, not the one that branches off, goes to the left, but the one that stays true to the right, that's pointing a little high. But I couldn't fix it without just destroying the whole thing. So it's actually seems to be pointing at an anther, but it should be pointing more at the white line, the stamen, or you can also see style as well. Not style, I'm sorry, that's the female part. Filament's the word I was looking for. So just remember that arrow is pointing a little high. It should be pointing at the white line. But that's the two male parts. The anther is where the pollen is released, and of course the stamen of the filament is the pathway up there after it's produced. Okay, on to the female parts. You've got the stigma. Each one of those little things, each one of those light green tube-looking things are a stigma. So this plant could produce many seeds. This is similar to what like a sunflower would do. When you have all those, if you've ever seen a big seed head on a sunflower, they're just full of. There's probably a couple of bags worth of sunflower seeds on those things. But each one of those is a stigma. That's where the pollen lands. fertilization occurs, and then it travels down into the ovals. All right, continue to look at the female portion of the reproductive parts. You've got your ovary. Okay, just like with a female, this is where the new offspring is going to develop. In this case, it'll be a seed, as in a plant. But you got your ovaries around. That's the darker green, and that very center is where the oval, where the actual development happens, developing into the seeds. And you can see a seed here to the right below me. The cotyledon, that's that seed coat covering a lot of the resources and food sources for the developing plant are in there. You get your microphyll, which is the bottom right. That's where kind of the cell differentiation occurs. You've got your radicle, which is kind of the root stem portion of the new, what's going to be the new plant. Your epicotyl, that's the leaf section. And the testes is kind of a hard coating to protect all that. But eventually, like if you look at a peanut, when you look at one, all that you see is the cotyledon, and then of course you don't. When if you get a jar of peanuts, you don't see the plant part on there. That's been removed, but the cotyledon is that big meaty section of like a seed. Okay, the last thing to think about in the plant parts is monocots and dicots. And if you're from a farming family, you're probably well familiar with these terms. But in monocots, mono means one, di means two. In this case, monocots will have a single cotyledon. Dicots will have two of them. Monocots have long, narrow leaves, as you can see, and parallel veins. Whereas the dicots are broad leaves, which is most of the plants, most of the trees, I mean. And then their veins will have either the web-like or vein-like, or maybe even the dichotomous veins. Monocots, if you looked at their vascular tissue, they're going to be kind of scattered around. Dicots are in a circle in the middle, and of course, as it would come up in test questions, monocots are, flowers are in groups of 3, so like 3, 6, 9, something like that. And then the flowers of a dicot are either in groups of 4 or 5, so it'd be like 4, 8, 12, 16, or 5, 10, 15, 20 flowers on a particular plant. Well, that's our video over the parts of a plant. When we come back together next time, we're going to talk about the leaf of a plant. We'll see you then.